dealing with that. I just don't, it's not clear to me what it is.
Fair enough. I've never come across semantic holism before. That's really weird.
Well, it's often, I mean, there's an intuitive basis for it, right? Which is just that it does seem like concepts. Like if you think about it, take a proposition that you believe, right? Now, even if you think that a proposition is itself some kind of irreducible whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, there are parts embedded in it, right? Because like if I say it, you know, the rain is heavy today, right? Well, there's presumably a concept of rain and a concept of heavy and so on, right? Which are in some ways discrete concepts, right? And so then we ask, well, what are those, right? Well, there are propositions which attach to those, right? Things like, I mean, as part of your web of beliefs, right? Things like, well, rain is the stuff that falls out of skies, right? It's made out of water and so on. And it sort of seems like with each of those, you're going to have these concepts that in some way constitute the propositions, even if not exhaust, you know, even if there's sort of like insufficient to, even if something, there has to be something over and above the constituent concepts for something to count as a proposition. Nonetheless, there are going to be these constituent concepts. And so eventually it's, those concepts are going to be cashed out in terms of propositions that constitute other concepts that you have, right? And it's not going to be clear where anything begins and ends, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a semantic, your concepts are basically, each concept is going to basically be part of a semantic web. So I think that would be sort of like the intuitive sort of reason why semantic holism would seem plausible, right?
Yeah, I feel like this is so what you just described sounds like it's sort of phenomenological in nature, right? Like you're tracing out your own internal kind of connections between the ideas or whatever. And I think I can sort of agree that epistemic structure is web-like, but that doesn't seem to me the same as saying that the semantics would be web-like, because I take it that the semantics would like dictate actual entailments that obtain, right? Like you're basically giving the truth conditions of a given sentence. So you'll be saying things that obtain which make that sentence true. So there's a kind of like worldly entailment. That's what semantics is. And I don't think that like you can tell what that's going to be like just by examining your own web of beliefs, if you see what I mean. Like it's sort of essentially an extrinsic or external kind of idea semantics, it seems to me. But maybe I'm presuming something semantic externalism then as a consequence. I don't know. Seems like we're going quite a long way afield from where we started.
Well, I'll give you Bill Gromy's paper, why holism, meaning semantic holism, is harmless and necessary.
It's harmless and what? Sorry?
And necessary.
And necessary.
Which I remember thinking was a very persuasive paper, but I don't know if he addresses the kind of objection that you're raising in there. It's been a while since I've read that, but I'll send that to you, and you can tell me if you think it, has any cogency.
Okay, good, thanks. So I'm going to have to go to bed in a minute, but let me just see if we can just recap a bit. So I think my initial idea, right, was that there was some, I don't know, I guess it's like a companions in guilt, although sometimes I wonder if people use that term differently. But let's put it like this, some symmetry between the two positions, right?
Right.
Such that if his objection were to hold against the realist, like the extent to which it's a successful objection, it feels like I can parody that to make the symmetrical objection to his theory. And it was like the complaint was that for the realist, when they say that the good is a semantic primitive or something, then that's like evacuated the concept of all of its content, and he finds he doesn't know what they mean or whatever, and they can't provide any meaning to him to answer that question. And I was trying to reconstruct something on what I took to be his view, which would be vulnerable to the same objection. And I was thinking about, well, on his view, the semantics for moral claims is relative to people's desires. And the standard analysis of desires makes, like, naturally seems to be hierarchical. So you have a desire to do A partly because you've got a wider desire to do B, like study hard in school because you want to get good grades or something. And then that opens up this kind of like contingency argument style set of options where, like, how far does that chain go? Right? Does it go on forever? Does it go in a circle? Does it end at some point? And then there seems to at least be some distinction to be drawn where the realist is going to say they have a chain of desires too, and that would end at a certain point, but they would be saying that that's where they it ends in a kind of maybe a belief or awareness of or something, some state of affairs being irreducibly good, and that's enough to like end their dependency or their desire hierarchy at that point. But like, what am I saying? So for Lance's view, he doesn't have he can't help himself to an objective moral fact or something, because that's exactly what he denies as an anti-realist. So, so I initially thought that means. Sorry, let me just have a sip of water. I initially thought that means he's in trouble, right? Because his view is exactly the same, would be vulnerable to exactly the same type of objection, namely that like there's this semantic primitive. So if one's unintelligible, so is the other, or something, right? If one's devoid of content, so is the other. Your reply to that was that he would probably say something about a causal story there, which was providing an explanation of why he had that primitive belief, but it just wouldn't be in terms of other primitive beliefs, or primitive desires or something. Right. In which case, I think that's what got me thinking about, like, well, does it matter if his original complaint is internal, like an internal critique or an external critique? Because, like,
right.
Is it easier for me to sell what I'm saying as being an internal critique, right? Like, on his own view, he should find that intolerable on his theory, right? Rather than I don't understand it or something. I think it's probably harder to sell the internal critique version because I'm having to say, look, on your theory, you get to this point where your desires bottom out, and all you can say is some causal story to explain why you have that first level of desire. And you should find that to be unacceptable. And I'm not sure I really know what to say about why he should find that unacceptable. If like, is it enough to just point at the his critique of the realist and say, look, they're the same, so you should find it intolerable? It does actually. It just feels like maybe this is just quite weak as a line of attack. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's quite flimsy.
You should become an anti-realist instead.
Sorry, you were going to become an anti-realist?
I said, Yes, given that the argument doesn't work, you should become an anti-realist instead, I think.
I see. Yeah. Well, no. If I if I'm unsuccessful in critiquing him, it doesn't mean he's right. But yeah, I think I'm just I'm coming to the view that maybe that's not like as good a point as I thought it was before. Then and symmetry doesn't seem to be quite clear enough. It's interesting though. But does that seem right to you, Jack?
Yes, yeah.
But then I think we started talking about a more potentially plausible route is to just simply is to say, look, do you accept semantic primitivity anywhere? Right? Because if he says no, that's really quite a weird position. Although I suppose we just talked about holism, but like it's fairly nuanced. I'm not sure if that is his view. Whereas if he's happy enough with it in certain fields, like maybe logic or whatever, like negation operator or something, then I think what that does is at least establish a burden on him then to draw the distinction between the two cases, why one is reasonable primitivity and the other one is unreasonable. Right? So that at least feels like an interesting way to frame a conversation. It's not like a winning
That's right.
thing, but yeah, that feels like a nice angle to start talking about it.
You're going to be debating him.
At some point,
Well,
yeah.
it's
Well,
a
discussion. Yeah. Not a formal debate.
I don't think Lance thinks of what he's doing. I think I've heard it looking to debate it. Just
Jack, we can't hear you. Your mic is bad.
Sorry. I'm sure what's causing that. You hear wind?
No,
I don't know if it's wind.
Kind of crackly, Jack. Coming in and out a little bit too.
I'll try rejoining.
I think it's an audio issue.
Sorry, is it better now?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, yep. Sounds great now, Jack.
I think Lance doesn't think of what he's doing.
Nope, now it's bad again.
You've gone again.
Sorry, I'm getting out of the wind, so it should be better. But yeah, he doesn't think. I've heard him say that. I think I've heard him say that he isn't really looking to debate.
Yeah, I think that's right. He's not really trying to do debates or whatever.
Yeah, he's trying to get clarity.
Yeah,
but he doesn't seem to ever get it.
No, in a way, I'm like, I don't really mind about that. Like, I'm happy with just the reality that some people just like have an entrenched view and nobody can like talk them out of it, and they're just honestly going around. Like everybody's a bit like that. I almost can't imagine a theist ever persuading me that Christianity is true. Like, regardless of what they say, I just
right.
it's probably too late for that. It'll just never happen. And he might be like that with moral anti-realism, and I don't have a problem if that's the case. I'm not like determined to change his mind or something. That I might just be the same, but for realism, for all I know, right? So I think it's the only point in having these conversations is just to try and sort of learn and explore the ideas a bit. But this whole debate paradigm, it's all about like winning the debate and stuff. It's a bit shit, really. Like, who actually cares about that? Like, who won the debate? Like, I don't know.
Ask yourself.
Ask yourself had a conversation with. No, I'm sorry. I guess he had a conversation with Joe Schmidt, which was kind of like many of the Lance Bush conversations, I gather, which is kind of like, well, what do you mean by these facts?
Mm-hmm.
and Joe is just, I mean, I didn't watch it, but I gather it was just sort of Joe would try to explain it, but ultimately it was an appeal to a primitive, and Isaac didn't possess that concept, and there was just sort of like nowhere to go.
Mm.
But I don't know if it was different when Joe talked with Lamb. So I haven't watched that yet. But Josh seemed to think that was a good discussion.
Okay, I'll watch it and see. I think Joe's a realist, is he?
Yes.
Yeah, he's a realist. Probably, my guess is probably he has views similar to yours.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that Lance can probably give a perfectly coherent explanation probably of any of these questions. Like, I'm not going to get him in a gotcha that he's never thought about before. I think his position's probably completely internally consistent. It's a bit like this same debates over like whether possible worlds are real or if they're like ersatz or whatever. Everybody's got like really detailed, well worked out explanations of what they mean on both sides, and nobody's like committing some obvious blunder that can just be exposed and like prove them all wrong. It's like that with this. I'm sure he's going to have like a reasonably convincing explanation for any of the things I might ask him. Absolutely. So it's not about like there is no winning. It's already. It's not. That's not the paradigm. Anyway, I think I'm going to call it a night because it's quite late here. But that's really helpful just to like help me get through all of that content. It's sort of building up in my head. I need to just talk it through. So thank you for your help.
Yeah, well, the owners will be really happy if you'll come back.
Yeah, Alex, I'm a mod here. I really thank you for coming. We're thrilled to have you. Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. Well, it was nice to talk to you. But yeah, cool.
Sleep
See you in a bit.
well.
Yeah. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
See ya. What a king.
He's like royalty.
It's a shame that he's, so self-conscious about being perceived as effeminate.
Yeah, he's a Chad. I don't know what he's talking about.
Meanwhile, Detroyer is on the God Talk stage. Oh no, he didn't join it. He's in the audience.
Couldn't we have got him in here?
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't. He probably didn't see it. He probably didn't even see we were in here because
You should
the
have
channel
IGM'd him, maybe.
is probably like lower in the like.
Also, big thanks to everyone for being on their best behavior. That was great, everybody. Thank you.
You should have pinged everybody, by the way.
Well, he wasn't actually, I think, looking for a public conversation. Oddly enough, he just sort of said, "Where can I talk to you? Are you guys back on Discord? And so then he was like, I wanted to run something by you, But I don't think he minded either.
Have you spoken to him about realism?
Yeah, I've spoken to him about realism before. So I went down a kind of different line of approach where I was sort of explaining that I didn't really see what would turn on it because there'd still be sort of like a pragmatic and an epistemic problem. Like the pragmatic one would be, look, even if there are these, let's grant for the sake of argument, there are these external normative reasons or categorical moral facts or whatever you want to call them. Well, it really doesn't matter. Like the point is, you need the thing about those kind of facts is that they're true regardless of what the person desires, right? And so they only play a role in deliberation when somebody has a desire to be in accord with those facts, right?
Yeah.
And so what really matters is the kind of fact that actually connect to your desire. So it kind of is irrelevant whether it's categorically morally true, unless somebody has that value of being in accord with what's like
Right.
categorically morally true. And then on the other hand is even if somebody believed, even if you got somebody to become a moral realist, how would you get them to agree on what the moral facts were? Like, what's the procedure?
Wait, but aren't you gonna have that problem with like external value properties, the like epistemic?
No. The point is, if there's a more, I was just saying that for the robust realist of like Alex's type, right? I was just saying to him, look, I don't actually understand what these things are, and I think there probably is an argument to show that this doesn't make any sense. But even if I didn't have an argument like that, I'm not really sure why anybody's interested in it, because the point is that it just seems to me like it really doesn't matter whether something
Right, that's
is
a pragmatic
categorical.
objection, right? But I'm saying, like, what about like, how do you get around the epistemic objection? Like, what's the procedure there?
No, but I was just saying that I'm saying that there isn't some solution as to what there isn't some procedure by which to determine which of the categorical moral facts are true. And given that that's the case, that's like a further pragmatic objection. Right? Like, I could convince you of moral realism, right? And let's say then that we just had different ideas as to which, you think rape is good and I think rape is bad. Well, so then I need to convince you that you have
Sure, it
the
wouldn't be the
false view.
reverse.
Yeah, or whatever. But the point is, then I have to convince you. Then I have to convince you that you're wrong. So what's the procedure, right? Now, of course, that doesn't mean moral realism is false, but it kind of makes it seem like it's pointless. What really matters is a way to convince people to acquire certain values.
All right, so it's not like by which faculty do we get this knowledge? It's like, how do we determine which moral facts hold?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
What's wrong with like the standard answer of like, well, it's just the ones that are real I find intuitive or something, or like
Yeah, but then the intuitions conflict, right? It's like not interesting, right? When people appeal to intuitions, it's never interesting when people appeal to intuitions, because when they talk to somebody who has the opposite intuitions, that's the end of that.
No, how do you deal with that? And it's like comes to logical principle or mathematical principles.
Oh, I
Like,
mean,
what's
I'm
the-
not sure that those are I'm not sure that those are productive disputes.
It's like whether like which logic I accept. Like, do you think once it's reached like intuitive bottom, that's like the end of the discussion?
If people have conflicting intuitions, it's not really clear where you go from there.
Right. And for pragmatics, for your like view on this, like the value properties, like are they just tied to your motivations? Like they explain motivations. Is that the idea?
Yeah, they explain them, but it's not something that's useful for, like, I don't think it has any practical implications.
What
Because
doesn't have?
the reason why I'm bringing that up is because it does seem like realists have a very deep anxiety about realism being false, right? Like I'm sure there are exceptions, but in my experience, right, when you talk to people like Schaefer Landau or Parfit, um, there's this sort of deep, or David Enoch would probably be another one, that there's this like deep sense that it would be the end of the world if realism were false, right? And what I'm trying to say is it's hard to understand how that anxiety makes any sense given these pragmatic and epistemic considerations. Given these
Right.
pragmatic and epistemic considerations, right? It's like nothing changes whether realism is true or not. So there's no reason to have any anxiety about it at all. But like, if I say that I'm some kind of moderate realist, it's not because there's some anxiety that, you know, if it were false, nothing would make any sense really. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like right and wrong.
Right. I was more interested how like you incorporate your posits into like being relevant to us in any way.
No, I don't think
I
I don't think
understand
it's
that like
relevant. Yeah. I don't think
well I
it's
mean you think
relevant.
they're relevant to like explain motivation, do you?
Yeah, but
Not
I don't think that's the type of explanation that's like very interesting, because normally when we talk about explanation, let's say in like the scientific realm, we're looking for some specific fact, right, that will make a difference to uh, further actions we might undertake, given that it's true, right? Because if it turned out to be false, then we would do other things that were different, right? But all I'm saying is there just needs to be some kind of general explanation, right? And so metaphysically, we have to posit um, these kinds of properties, but they don't really tell us anything interesting beyond that.
right. Do you believe in like supervenience? On
No,
like oh okay.
Sounds like being a moral realist is a lot of hard work.
Not for me, Gizmo. Not for me.
it's probably not hard work for like John Lee
I
if
don't think
he's a
it's a real.
realist. But he wants to be a realist.
It depends on which conversation you have.
Yeah, that's true. See, Detroit. It looks like Detroit didn't stick around in God Talk. I guess they're having a stage in PNR.
I hate that server.
I'm banned from there at the moment, but it wasn't like I had really any desire to go in there when I wasn't banned.
You see. It's still run by like Banshee and
Yeah, as far as I know.
okay.
Banshee or Blackout, one of them.
Those two, yeah. I think they're both there. Now, why is Delaney angry at Whitney?
Through LARPing. And then he takes a lot of random shit really seriously. Like, it's very strange.
Oh, that is strange.
He doesn't know he's on the internet and can just turn off his monitor.